Good morning, Year 9, and welcome to Week 5. This week, we will be looking at, is Mumbai becoming more sustainable and how? There are three key questions to look at this week. We are going to look at the top-down project of Vision Mumbai and judge its success. We're going to look at a bottom-up project and again judge its success, and also look again at Dharavi in more detail to look at its sustainable features. By the end of this week, you should have a fairly good idea of what life is like in Dharavi. If you don't feel like you understand what life might be like there, do watch the Slumming It programme that was put onto the grid. This lesson is heavily based on the textbook, as the textbook did a good job with this particular information, so you may use the pages at the end for this lesson. It focuses on sustainability and the different approaches to increasing sustainability and levels of development in Mumbai. Okay, so as a starter, what do you understand by the term sustainability? Pause the presentation. So what is sustainability? The original definition of sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So the idea is that what we do now should not ruin things for future generations. This was defined in 1987 and is still very widely used today. There can be two approaches to sustainability. So one, you can see it as a three-legged stool. I've also seen it as the three pillars of sustainability, and it judges the idea on economic, social and environmental benefits and problems. As it says, if the benefits outnumber the problems, then it's a good idea. Secondly, as a quadrant, using 4 questions shown in figure 1. For example, does a scheme benefit everyone? Will it last? Is it bottom-up? And is it eco-friendly? And just a general point about bottom-up schemes, these seem to be generally recognised as the best type of development schemes now, and top-down schemes are generally criticised as not trickling down the benefits to the poorest people. So just to introduce sustainability in Mumbai, this is one index that was put together a few years ago. In figure 1, this is the overall sustainability index in terms of people, planet and profit, and we can see that Mumbai sadly comes quite low down at number 47. You could argue that because it's a developing country with a lack of money, you would expect it to be quite low down. And you would expect the more developed cities to be quite high up. Figure 3 shows Mumbai to be slightly higher for energy use, renewables, greenhouse gas emissions, so environmental stability as they call it. And there are some features of Mumbai that make it more sustainable than cities like London. For example, they have a higher rate of plastic recycling in Mumbai than they do in London. The final one looks more at economic issues such as transport infrastructure, economic development and the cost of doing business. And again, sadly, Mumbai is quite low down the list at number 47. So that just puts Mumbai into some kind of context in terms of sustainability before we go any further. So just a recap of previous learning. You would have looked at this in development dynamics. You would have looked at a top-down project of the dam in India. And a top-down project is when the decision-making about the development of a place is done by governments or large companies. So we're going to focus on one top-down development scheme called Vision Mumbai. So in 2003, a report suggested that $40 billion was needed to improve Mumbai. It involved a partnership between government, property companies and investors, so it was typical of top-down development, i.e. it was very big. it would be completed by 2050. The plan was to transform Mumbai, including building 1 million low-cost homes and reducing slums, improving transport infrastructure by road and rail, and improving air and water quality by reducing pollution. Now, if you look at each of those three targets, you will hopefully remember that this is what we looked at in week 4. We looked at the problems of slums, the problems of transport, and the problems of water supply and sanitation. There were 4 core targets: to demolish the slums and provide cheap housing, to improve water, sanitation and healthcare, to improve rail, bus and road transport, and to boost economic growth. Quite ambitious targets. On the right-hand side, first of all, you can see slums in the foreground and high-rise flats or buildings in the background. And this was one of the ideas that they were going to put into place, which was to knock down the slums and to build high-rise flats. I'm not going to read through all of the information on the left. It may be good to pause the presentation and just read through what they did in this plan. What's really key is whether it was successful. As I mentioned before, Slumming It, episode 2, about halfway through, has an interview with a lady who lives in Dharavi, and she talks about whether or not she thinks this plan is a good plan, and it may be worth watching that. It's about a 10-minute clip, and she talks about what she thinks would happen. This was before anything happened on the project. It also focuses on the architect of the scheme, and there's an interview with him, and he talks about what he thinks is necessary about this particular project. Okay, again, pause the presentation and have a read through of the information on this page. For an extra challenge, in The Guardian there was an article about Vision Mumbai. The headline is "Poor Squeezed Out by Mumbai's Dream Plan." Many people felt that this plan to remove the slums and replace them with high-rise flats was just a way to remove the poor from the centre of Mumbai. The centre of Mumbai had a very high land value, and cynical people felt that this was a really good way to get their hands on this particular section of land. And there were a number of reasons why local people who lived in Dharavi didn't think this scheme was a good idea. And one very simple one is that, as we've seen before, the informal economy is very, very important to people in Dharavi, and people would not be able to move their workshops into the high-rise flats, so they wouldn't be able to work from home anymore. And this was seen as a major problem with the scheme. A second very important problem with the scheme was it only applied to slum dwellers that had been living there since 2000. And so anybody who was more of a newcomer would not be rehoused in the new high-rise flats. So bottom-up projects. Bottom-up projects are where experts will work with communities to identify their needs, offer assistance, and let people have more control over their lives. And they are often run by charities or NGOs such as WaterAid, Oxfam, Save the Children, and so on. So I'd like to look at quite an interesting bottom-up project, one that's called Reality Tours and Travel. And the idea is that Westerners like us would go to Mumbai, and we would be taken on a tour of the authentic parts of the city. So not the tourist areas, but the actual real life areas. So one thing that you could do is to go to Mumbai and go on a tour around Dharavi. The money that they make from the tours would then be ploughed back into the community of Dharavi and other places in Mumbai. And as they say at the top, 80% of the profits go back into the community through the local charity. So before we go any further, it would be really great to watch this video about reality tours, about the slum tours in Dharavi. And I've given you the link and the name of the video. So just pause the presentation and watch the video. And whilst you're watching it, think about how this local charity helps improve people's lives from the bottom up. So as we did with the top-down scheme, we also need to look at if this is a successful bottom-up project. What we can see at the bottom of the slide are the key achievements so far in terms of livelihood or jobs or future jobs, education and health and well-being. Pause the presentation, have a little read of some of the different schemes. You can obviously click on their website and have a look in more detail, which is called Reality Gives. Here's some comments that I've put together to help you decide if it is successful. There's also a quote in the bottom right, really important to hear from the people themselves. Obviously it could be biased because it's on their website, but it will give you an idea about whether or not this has been a successful development. And when you look at this, if this is one of the tasks you choose, make sure you justify your decisions on whether you think this is successful. You could look at an alternative bottom-up scheme, which is in the textbook, which is a charity called LSS, and there is quite a bit of information on the textbook if you would prefer to look at that. Also this week is the opportunity to watch the second episode of Slumming It. There was one quote that I felt was really important about Dharavi. When we look at videos or images of slums and we just see the poverty, we forget that there are positives as well. And Prince Charles said, "I strongly believe that the West has much to learn from societies and places which, while sometimes poorer in material terms, are infinitely richer in the way in which they live and organise themselves as communities." So although they might not have as much stuff as us, they actually work together as a community much more effectively. So in this episode, there's a focus on Dharavi's recycling industry, rag pickers who collect rubbish and sell it for recycling, and also the top-down scheme of Vision Mumbai, which I mentioned before. So this week, choose 2 tasks. 2 of the tasks are based on Vision Mumbai because it's really important that you have an example of a top-down project. One of them is on the bottom-up projects, again, really useful, and there's the episode 2 of Slumming It as well. And here are the textbook pages as I have provided you with before, which you can use for the top-down project, and then this is the pages for the bottom-up scheme if you would like to use those. Thank you very much, and again we look forward to receiving your work. Thanks very much.